Welcome to African Mafia Stories, where loyalty is currency, power has a price, and every city hides a secret. Today's story is based in Mozambique. Enjoy!
Celina Mucavele had forgotten how Maputo smelled after rain. Wet jacaranda leaves, salt from the bay, charcoal smoke rising from roadside grills. The sharp sweetness of ripe mangoes from women selling fruit beneath umbrellas along Avenida Julius Nyerere. She lowered the window of her brother's Mercedes and breathed it in. "Home?" asked the driver. Celina smiled. Almost. She had been away for 4 years. Johannesburg first, then Lisbon, building a career in hotel management that had finally given her something her surname could not, a reputation that belonged entirely to her. In Maputo, Mucavele opened doors. It also made people lower their voices. Her older brother, Mateus, had spent 15 years turning their late father's chaotic transport business into one of Mozambique's largest private logistics companies. At least, that was what newspapers called it. People who knew better called it something else. Celina preferred not to ask questions whose answers might ruin lunch. The Mercedes turned toward Summershield. Her brother's house appeared behind high walls and flowering bougainvillea, elegant without being absurdly enormous. Mateus disliked people who displayed money too loudly. "Rich men who need fountains are usually compensating for something," he once told her. Celina had asked what. Mateus had thrown a bread roll at her. She was still smiling when the gates opened. Then she saw him. Rafael Nhantumbo stood beside the entrance. And 4 years disappeared. He was speaking to one of the security men, sleeves rolled to his elbows, dark trousers, white shirt open at the collar. Broader than she remembered. A little older around the eyes. His hair was cut shorter now, and there was a faint scar beneath his jaw that definitely had not been there when she left Mozambique. But he still had that maddening stillness. Rafael never seemed hurried. Even when everyone around him was falling apart, he looked as though he had already considered the problem, rejected 3 bad solutions and was waiting patiently for everyone else to catch up. He glanced toward the arriving car, stopped speaking. Celina's stomach performed something deeply embarrassing. She blamed the flight. The driver opened her door. Rafael walked toward her. "Celina." Rafael. 4 years. That was apparently all they had. He looked at her for a long moment. "You cut your hair." She touched the curls brushing her shoulders. "Excellent observation. I see Mateus continues employing you for your intelligence." His mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. There it was. That tiny reaction had once been enough to ruin entire weeks of her life. "You look well," he said. "You look old." "I'm 38. Ancient. You're 33. Women age differently." "How?" "Better." That time he smiled properly. Celina hated how much she had missed it. Before either of them could say more, the front door burst open. Finally. Mateus came down the steps with both arms open. Celina forgot Rafael instantly. Almost. She ran toward her brother. Mateus lifted her completely off the ground. "You're crushing me. You've become skinny." "I have not." "You have. Europe has been starving you." "I lived in Portugal, Mateus. They have food." "Not proper food." He kissed both her cheeks. "You're staying this time." It was not a question. Celina stepped back. "For 6 months." 1 year. 6 months. 8. Mateus. 7. "Rafael," Celina called over her shoulder. "Please explain negotiations to your friend." Rafael collected one of her suitcases. "I stopped trying 15 years ago." Mateus pointed at him. "This is why nobody respects you." Celina looked between them. Some things had not changed. Mateus and Rafael had been inseparable since they were teenagers. 2 boys from families that had lost almost everything after their father's business collapsed, rebuilding together from trucks, warehouses, and borrowed money. Then something darker had grown around the business. Protection. Smuggling. Port connections. Favors. Men who arrived at midnight and never used surnames. Celina had learned early not to ask why Rafael occasionally disappeared for several days or why Mateus's office had 2 safes when the company accounts required none. But Rafael had always been different with her. Careful. Almost painfully careful. Especially after the night before she left Mozambique. The kiss. Celina had spent 4 years pretending it had not happened. Judging by Rafael's expression, so had he. Dinner lasted 3 hours. Mateus insisted the cook prepare every Mozambican dish Celina claimed to have missed overseas. Matapa thick with ground peanuts. Grilled prawns bright with chili and lemon. Shimar. Chicken cooked over charcoal. Fresh cashews. By the time dessert arrived, Celina suspected her brother intended to reverse 4 years of foreign living in one evening. Their mother's old friend Dona Rosa joined them, along with several people from Mateus's company. And then Augusto Vilar arrived. Celina stood immediately. "Tio Augusto. Look at you." Augusto embraced her warmly. He was nearly 70 now, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, with the smooth manners of a diplomat and the eyes of a man who missed very little. He had been Mateus and Rafael's mentor for almost 20 years. When their father died, Augusto had helped Mateus keep the company alive. He had taught him business, negotiation, politics, and, Celina suspected, several things nobody mentioned during family dinners. You came home at last, Augusto said. For a while. She says 6 months, Mateus complained. Augusto smiled. Then we must make Mozambique persuasive. Better than threatening to confiscate my passport. Mateus looked offended. I only suggested it. Rafael sat across the table. Celina caught him watching her. Only briefly. Then his gaze dropped. Augusto noticed. Celina saw that too. Something unreadable passed across the older man's face. Gone almost immediately. Later, when the guests had left, Celina stepped onto the balcony overlooking Maputo Bay. The night was warm. Somewhere beyond the walls, music drifted through the city. Marabenta spilling from a distant bar, guitar and rhythm riding the humid air. She leaned against the railing. You still do that? Rafael. She did not turn. Do what? Disappear from parties before everyone else. I learned from you. He came beside her. Not too close. Never too close. Below them, headlights moved along the avenue. For several seconds neither spoke. Then Celina said quietly, you never called. Rafael looked out toward the bay. You told me not to. That was 4 years ago. You were very specific. I was angry. You were always angry with me. She turned. That was because you were extremely annoying. I still am. Yes. He finally looked at her. Something changed in the air between them. 4 years collapsed again. Celina remembered his hand at the back of her neck. The wall behind her. His mouth against hers. Then his voice afterward. This cannot happen. Not I don't want you. That would have been easier. Instead. Mateus is my brother. As though she had asked him to choose. Celina straightened. I'm not 29 anymore, Rafael. I know. And you don't need to protect me from bad decisions. I know. Good. She started toward the door. His voice stopped her. Celina. She turned. For the first time that evening, the calm expression slipped. I didn't call because I knew if I heard your voice, I would ask you to come back. Her chest tightened. Before she could answer, footsteps approached. Mateus appeared in the doorway. Rafael. The moment vanished. Rafael stepped away from the railing. What happened? Mateus's face had changed. No humor now. One of our trucks was stopped outside Matola. So? The police knew exactly which container to open. Silence. Celina watched Rafael. What was inside? She asked. Neither man answered. That was answer enough. Mateus looked at Rafael. Only 6 people knew that route. Rafael's jaw tightened. And Augusto? Mateus hesitated. Then nodded. Augusto knew. Far across Maputo Bay, lightning flickered over the Indian Ocean. The storm had moved away from the city. But inside the Mucavele house, another one had just arrived. By breakfast, Mateus had already decided Celina was leaving Maputo. She discovered this because her suitcase was standing by the front door. She stared at it. Then at her brother. Then back at the suitcase. No. Mateus continued drinking coffee. Good morning to you too. Celina folded her arms. Why is my suitcase downstairs? Because you're going away for a few days. I arrived yesterday. I noticed. And now you're sending me away. I prefer temporarily relocating. That sounds exactly like kidnapping with better vocabulary. Across the table, Rafael lowered his coffee cup to hide a smile. Celina pointed at him. Do not encourage him. I haven't said anything. You smiled. That's not illegal. In this house, I may introduce legislation. Mateus sighed. The humor disappeared quickly. He had barely slept. Celina could see it in the heaviness beneath his eyes and the untouched food on his plate. The police seizure outside Matola had been worse than he first admitted. 2 trucks had been detained. 1 driver had vanished before questioning. And someone had known the route, the cargo, and the exact time the convoy would pass through the checkpoint. Celina had spent most of the night hearing doors open and close downstairs. Men arriving. Phones ringing. Rafael's low voice in the study. Mateus's sharper one answering him. Now morning sunlight spilled through the windows while the house pretended nothing had happened. Celina hated houses that did that. Where exactly am I being relocated? In Hambane. She blinked. In Hambane. For few days. Why? Mateus looked at Rafael. That was when Celina understood. She turned slowly. No. Rafael leaned back in his chair. You don't even know what you're refusing. I'm refusing anything involving you driving me somewhere against my will. You preferred me yesterday. Yesterday you weren't participating in my abduction. Mateus rubbed his forehead. You two are exhausting. Celina ignored him. Tofo. Rafael nodded. There's a house near the beach. Whose? Mine. That caught her. You have a house in Tofo. I have several things you don't know about. She looked at him for a beat too long. His expression stayed neutral. Annoyingly neutral. Mateus stood. You leave in an hour. Celina turned on him. I'm 33 years old. Yes. I run hotels. Yes. I employ 180 people. Wonderful. You cannot simply order me out of Maputo. Mateus came around the table. His voice softened. I know. That stopped her. He touched her shoulder. But someone inside my organization is feeding information to people who want me weakened. Until I know who, I need you somewhere safer. Celina searched his face. Do you think Augusto did it? Mateus's jaw tightened. No. Too quickly. Rafael looked away. Celina noticed. So you do? I said no. You said it like someone lying to a priest. Celina. She looked between the two men. Augusto Vilar had practically raised them. He had helped Mateus after their father died. Introduced him to port officials, transport operators, politicians, and businessmen who owed favors to men who never wrote those favors down. Rafael had once called Augusto the closest thing either of them had to a second father. The possibility that he might betray Mateus seemed absurd, which was exactly what made it frightening. Celina exhaled. How long? 3 days. Rafael said nothing. She turned to him. How long? He met her eyes. A week. Mateus glared. Traitor. I prefer accurate kidnapping. Celina nearly laughed despite herself. Nearly. They left Maputo before noon. For the first hour Celina refused to speak. Rafael appeared entirely comfortable with this arrangement. He drove north along EN1 while Maputo slowly fell behind them, the city giving way to open stretches of road, roadside stalls, villages, palms and patches of red earth. Celina watched Mozambique unfold through the window. She had forgotten how enormous the sky felt here. In Europe, buildings had always seemed to interrupt everything. Here the horizon stretched without apology. Women walked along the roadside carrying baskets balanced effortlessly on their heads. Children waved at passing cars. Small markets appeared suddenly in clusters of color, selling bananas, tomatoes, coconuts, and bottles of fuel. Every so often the Indian Ocean appeared in flashes of impossible blue. Celina finally spoke. You could have refused. Rafael kept his eyes on the road. Refused what? My brother. No. Why? Because he asked me to keep you safe. She looked at him. Still keeping promises. His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Celina regretted the words immediately. Years ago, after their father died and Mateus suddenly became responsible for grieving 16-year-old sister, Rafael had made him a promise. She'll always be safe with me. Celina had heard about it accidentally years later. At first she found it touching. Then she discovered Rafael treated the promise like sacred law. Apparently kissing her violated subsection 12. You remember, Rafael said. Unfortunately. He glanced at her. That promise matters to me. That's the problem. How? You never see me without Mateus standing somewhere behind me. That's not true. It absolutely is. You think I see you as someone's little sister? Yes. Rafael was quiet. Then he said, that would make my life significantly easier. Celina turned toward him. He kept driving. She waited. Nothing. Rafael. Yes. You cannot say something like that and then become interested in potholes. It's a very dangerous road. You are impossible. I've been told. By me. Frequently. She looked out of the window again. This time she was smiling. They stopped outside Zai for lunch. The restaurant was simple, open-sided and busy, with plastic chairs under a shaded roof and the smell of grilled chicken drifting from a charcoal fire. Rafael ordered without asking her. Chicken, cassava, salad, cold water, and a bowl of chili sauce that Celina regarded suspiciously. You remember what I eat? He looked genuinely puzzled. Why wouldn't I? 4 years. She had changed cities, jobs, hairstyles, and apartments. And this man remembered she hated fizzy drinks with lunch. Celina picked up her fork. That's irritating. What? Nothing. A group of children chased one another outside. Music played softly from an old speaker somewhere behind the counter. For a few minutes they ate in comfortable silence. Then Rafael's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen. Something in his expression changed. Mateus. No. He stood. Stay here. Celina immediately stood too. No. Celina. You people need to stop saying my name like it's a complete instruction. Rafael walked toward the car. She followed. He stopped beside it. A black pickup had parked across the road. 2 men sat inside. Neither got out. Rafael watched them. The pickup drove away. Celina's pulse increased. Who were they? I don't know. Were they following us? I don't know. You're saying I don't know far too often for a man my brother trusts with firearms. He looked at her. Get in the car. This time she did. They reached Nhambane late in the afternoon. The road toward Tofo narrowed, lined with palms and low houses. Then the ocean appeared. Not glimpses. The whole thing. Blue water stretching beyond white sand, dhows in the distance, coconut palms bending toward the shore. Celina lowered the window. Warm salt air rushed inside. Something inside her loosened. I missed this. Rafael looked at her. Mozambique. She shook her head. This feeling. He understood. That was another irritating thing about him. He often did. Tofo was lively without feeling hurried. Surfers walked barefoot beside the road. Vendors sold carved jewelry and bright fabrics. Music drifted from restaurants. The smell of grilled seafood mixed with salt and smoke. Rafael turned onto a quieter track. His house stood behind dune vegetation overlooking the ocean. It was not grand. That surprised her. White walls. Wide veranda. Blue shutters. A hammock hanging beneath the shade. Celina stepped out slowly. This is yours. Yes. You secretly own a beach house. It's not secret. I didn't know. You were in Lisbon. She walked toward the veranda. Who decorated it? I did. Celina turned. You? He raised an eyebrow. You continue to underestimate me. There are cushions. I'm capable of cushions. There are decorative baskets. I contain multitudes. She laughed. Properly this time. Rafael watched her. For one brief second the years between them disappeared. Then his phone rang. Mateus. Rafael answered. Celina wandered toward the edge of the veranda but could still hear fragments. Yes. Silence. When? Another pause. No, don't touch anything until I get back. Celina turned. Rafael's face had hardened. He ended the call. What happened? A warehouse burned outside Maputo. Accident. No. How do you know? Because Augusto called Mateus 10 minutes before it happened. Celina went still. Why? He told him to stay away from the building. The ocean crashed against the shore below them. Maybe he was warning him. Maybe. You don't believe that. Rafael looked toward the water. I don't know what I believe anymore. For the first time since she had returned, Celina saw something vulnerable beneath his composure. Not fear. Grief. Augusto's betrayal would not simply damage the business. It would break something much older. She stepped closer. Rafael. He looked at her. You don't have to defend him because he raised you. His voice was quiet. You don't understand. Then tell me. He hesitated. When my mother died, I was 16. My father disappeared into himself. Mateus had your family. I had nobody. Celina had never heard him speak about that year. Augusto paid my school fees. Fed me. Gave me work. He taught me how to survive. And if he betrayed Mateus? Rafael's eyes met hers. Then everything he taught me was built on a lie. Celina reached for his hand before thinking. Their fingers touched. Neither moved. The ocean roared below. Rafael looked down at their joined hands. Then back at her. The old restraint returned. He gently pulled away. Celina's chest tightened. Still protecting me? No. His answer came immediately. Then what? Rafael looked at her for a long moment. Protecting myself. That silenced her. He stepped closer. Not touching. Close enough that she could see the tiny scar beneath his jaw. You think the problem is Mateus? Isn't it? No. His voice dropped. The problem is that I never stopped wanting you. Celina forgot the ocean. Forgot Maputo. Forgot Augusto. Forgot every clever answer she had ever possessed. Rafael's phone rang again. They both stared at it. Celina closed her eyes. You have got to be joking. Rafael actually laughed. And somewhere several hundred kilometers south, while the sun sank over Mozambique and fire consumed another piece of Mateus Mucavele's empire, someone was making certain Rafael would soon have far more dangerous choices to make than whether or not to kiss his best friend's sister. Rafael did not answer the second call immediately. He kept looking at Celina. The phone vibrated in his hand once, then again, but for several seconds neither of them moved. Celina could still hear his words. The problem is that I never stopped wanting you. For years. For years of wondering whether the kiss before Lisbon had meant anything to him at all. For years of occasionally convincing herself that she had imagined the way he had held her afterward, forehead resting against hers, breathing like a man who had just made the worst decision of his life. And now Rafael had admitted the truth with infuriating calm. The phone buzzed again. He finally looked at the screen and answered. Yes. Celina turned toward the ocean, partly to give him privacy and partly because she had no idea what expression her face was currently making. Behind her, Rafael's voice changed. When? A pause. Is Mateus there? Another pause. All right. Tell him not to leave the house. Celina turned back. Rafael ended the call. What happened? Another truck was hit. Her stomach dropped. Where? Near Maracuene. Was anyone hurt? One driver. He'll live. Celina exhaled. Rafael moved inside the beach house and called Mateus immediately. The living room was simple and beautiful. White walls, woven lampshades, wide windows open to the ocean. A place designed for peace. Nobody in it looked peaceful now. Mateus answered on speaker. Where are you? Tofo. Good. You said 1 week, Celina called. Mateus ignored her. Rafael leaned over the table. What happened? A vehicle blocked the road. 4 men. They took the driver's phone and burned the truck. Cargo. Gone. Which route? Mateus hesitated. Rafael's expression sharpened. Mateus. The route Augusto changed yesterday. Silence filled the room. Celina felt the pieces move into place. Not proof, but close. Rafael asked, what does Augusto say? That someone in his office accessed the schedule. Do you believe him? I don't know. Celina folded her arms. You both say that whenever the real answer is no. Mateus sighed through the phone. Augusto wants to meet tonight. Rafael straightened. No. Mateus laughed once. I wasn't asking. Don't go alone. I'm not stupid. Celina muttered, debatable. Thank you, Celina. You're welcome. Even Rafael smiled. Then Mateus's voice hardened. Rafael. Yes. Keep her there. Celina opened her mouth. Mateus anticipated her. I know you're listening. Then stop discussing me like livestock. I'll call later. The line went dead. Celina stared at the phone. I dislike him. No, you don't. At this exact moment, I do. Rafael picked up his phone. Celina watched him. So? He glanced at her. So? You were saying something before Mateus and his burning trucks interrupted us. Rafael's face became suspiciously blank. I don't remember. She almost laughed. You don't remember telling me you never stopped wanting me. That sounds dramatic. It was 30 seconds ago. I've had a difficult day. He walked toward the kitchen. Celina followed him. Rafael. He opened the refrigerator. Hungry. She stopped. Are you hiding behind food? There are prawns. You are hiding behind prawns. They're very good prawns. Celina laughed despite herself. Then she walked between him and the refrigerator. Rafael stopped. Move. No, Celina. You've spent years telling me what cannot happen. His amusement faded. I had reasons. Mateus. Yes. That's one reason. It's a substantial one. He isn't God. No, God is probably easier to negotiate with. She smiled. Rafael did not. I owe him everything. No, you don't. He gave me family. And you gave him the same. That's different. Why? Rafael looked at her for a long moment. Because he trusted me with you. There it was again. The promise. Celina leaned back against the counter. You know what bothers me most? I suspect I'm about to find out. You and Mateus made a promise about me without me. Rafael frowned. I was 17. And apparently part of you stayed 17. Celina. You promised to keep me safe. Fine. Noble. Very heroic. Your sarcasm is becoming aggressive. I'm warming up. His mouth twitched. She stepped closer. But somewhere along the way, you decided loving me would break the promise. Rafael's expression changed. It could destroy my friendship with your brother. Maybe. That doesn't frighten you. Of course it does. Her voice softened. But I'm tired of everyone protecting relationships around me while pretending mine don't matter. That silenced him. Outside, the Indian Ocean rolled steadily toward the beach. Celina continued. I'm not saying this is simple. I'm saying it should be our complicated thing. Not Mateus's. Rafael stared at her. She saw the exact moment his restraint weakened. He stepped closer. Tell me to stop. Her heartbeat kicked hard. No, that wasn't what I asked. I know. His hand rose slowly to her face. Celina's breath caught as his fingers touched her cheek. Then he kissed her. There was nothing tentative about it. For years disappeared in seconds. Celina gripped the front of his shirt and pulled him closer, and somewhere in the middle of the kiss she laughed. Rafael broke away just enough to look at her. Why are you laughing? Because you wasted 4 years. You left the country. Because you told me this couldn't happen. That was clearly poor judgment. Extremely poor. He kissed her again. Slower this time. No panic. No guilt. No immediate retreat. Just Rafael. Just her. Then Celina's phone rang. They both froze. She looked toward the table. No. Rafael glanced at the screen. It's Mateus. Celina stared at the ceiling. Of course it is. He laughed quietly. Answer. You answer. I would like to live. Celina picked up the phone. Hello? Why are you breathless? She froze. Across from her, Rafael covered his mouth. Celina glared at him. I walked upstairs. You're downstairs. Her eyes narrowed. How do you know? I know the house. Rafael turned away, shoulders shaking. Mateus continued. Put Rafael on. No, Celina. He's busy. Rafael whipped around. She smiled sweetly. Busy doing what? Celina considered several answers purely to watch Rafael panic. Instead she handed him the phone. Your friend. Rafael took it cautiously. Yes. The humor disappeared from his face. When? Celina straightened. What happened? Rafael raised one finger. She waited. Then he said into the phone, We're coming back. Celina frowned. Mateus said something sharply. Rafael replied, I know what you said. It doesn't matter anymore. He ended the call. What? Rafael looked at her. Augusto never showed up. For the meeting? No. And? His house is empty. Celina felt a chill despite the heat. He ran. Maybe. What else? Rafael hesitated. Mateus found a second phone in Augusto's office. Celina's stomach tightened. Messages. Yes. To who? Someone in Durban. The word hung between them. Celina knew enough about Mateus's business to understand why that mattered. South African criminal networks had money, weapons, influence and access to routes far beyond Mozambique. If Augusto had been negotiating with one of them, this was no longer an internal betrayal. Are we going back to Maputo? Tomorrow morning. Celina nodded. Rafael looked at her. I'm sorry. For what? I wanted you away from this. She sighed. There you go again. What? Deciding what's best for me. His jaw tightened. Celina, you don't know how ugly this can become. No. Her gaze dropped to the faint scar beneath his jaw. But apparently you do. Rafael went still. She touched it lightly. I noticed this yesterday. It's nothing. Where did you get it? Work. That is a terrible answer. It was 3 years ago. What happened? A port dispute. That sounds suspiciously polite. It wasn't. Were you shot? No. Stabbed. He said nothing. Celina stared at him. Rafael. It missed anything important. You were stabbed. Technically. What does technically stabbed mean? That we should pack. She caught his wrist. Stop doing that. Doing what? Turning serious things into logistics. His expression softened. It's easier. For you. Yes. The honesty stopped her. Rafael looked toward the ocean. And sometimes I need things to be easy. Celina released his wrist. Fine. Then she nodded toward the veranda. 5 minutes. For what? Before we pack. They stepped outside. Tofo was turning gold. Far below, people walked along the beach. A fisherman pulled a small boat higher onto the sand. Children ran through the shallows while music drifted from somewhere farther down the coast. Celina leaned against the railing. For years ago, I thought you rejected me. Rafael stood beside her. I know. No, I really thought you didn't want me. He looked at her. I wanted you too much. She raised an eyebrow. That sounds suspiciously dramatic. It was a dramatic evening. You practically ran away afterward. I went outside. For 40 minutes. To think. You hid behind Mateus's Land Cruiser. Rafael frowned. How do you know that? I looked through the window. He stared at her. Then laughed. Celina laughed too. For a few precious seconds, there was no Augusto. No burned trucks. No syndicate. Just two people realizing how ridiculous they had been. Rafael reached for her hand. This time he did not let go. I'm still afraid of what Mateus will do. Celina squeezed his fingers. So am I. He might shoot me. He loves you. He owns several guns. He can do both. That is not reassuring. She smiled. Then we don't tell him yet. Rafael looked troubled. That feels dishonest. It is dishonest. You're very comfortable with this. My brother is a mafia boss. Ethical perfection was never going to be the family brand. Rafael laughed. Then his phone buzzed. A message. He opened it. The laughter vanished. Celina saw the change in his face. What? Rafael turned the screen toward her. A photograph. Mateus leaving his house in Maputo. Taken from across the street. Beneath it was 6 words. Come home and he dies first. Celina went cold. Rafael called Mateus immediately. No answer. Again. Nothing. A third time. Still nothing. Then Celina's own phone rang. Unknown number. Rafael looked at her. Don't answer. She already had. Hello? Static. Then an older man's voice. Calm. Familiar. Celina. Her face drained. Rafael moved closer. Who is it? She looked at him. Tio Augusto. Celina knew Augusto's voice too well to mistake it. For years it had belonged to birthdays, Sunday lunches, and long speeches about family loyalty. He had been the man who corrected Mateus when he became arrogant, defended Rafael when he was young and reckless, and once drove 3 hours through a storm because Celina had broken down outside Zizai. Now his voice came through an unknown number. Are you safe? Celina stared at Rafael. You're asking me that? Listen carefully. No, you listen. Mateus's trucks are burning, you disappeared, and now somebody is photographing my brother outside his house. Silence. Then Augusto sighed. Mateus was supposed to leave Maputo. What? I warned him. You threatened him. I warned him. Rafael reached for the phone. Celina shook her head. Why Durban? She asked. Augusto went quiet. That was enough. There is someone there, Celina continued. Someone you've been speaking to. Yes. Rafael's expression hardened. Who? Augusto ignored him. Celina, tell your brother to leave the ports alone. She frowned. Why? Because he doesn't understand what he's interfering with. Rafael took the phone from her. Then explain it. Augusto's voice changed when he heard him. Rafael. You raised us. I did. You sat at Mateus's table. Yes. You called him your son. Another silence. Rafael's jaw tightened. Was any of it real? Augusto answered quietly. All of it. Then why? Because Mateus was becoming too powerful to control. Celina felt something cold settle inside her. Rafael said, there it is. You think power makes men free, Augusto replied. It doesn't. It makes them visible. And you sold him. I protected what I built. No, Rafael said. You protected yourself. Augusto's voice lost its softness. Come back to Maputo and you will force my hand. The call ended. For several seconds neither Celina nor Rafael moved. Then Rafael grabbed his keys. We're leaving. Augusto told us not to. Exactly. They drove through the night. The road south was darker than Celina remembered, long stretches of black interrupted by village lights, roadside fires, and the occasional truck roaring past in the opposite direction. Rafael barely spoke. Celina watched him from the passenger seat. His anger was quiet. That worried her more than shouting would have. Near in Haraim, she finally said, pull over. No, you've been driving for 3 hours. I'm fine. You're furious. Yes. And exhausted. Yes. So pull over. He glanced at her. Are you always this difficult? Yes. He stopped beside a small roadside lodge surrounded by palms. They sat in the parked car with the engine ticking. Celina reached across and took his hand. Rafael looked down. You don't have to lose him alone. His voice was rougher than usual. He was my father before I understood that fathers could betray you. Celina squeezed his fingers. You still have Mateus. A humorless laugh. If he finds out about us, I may briefly have Mateus. She smiled despite everything. We are facing a criminal conspiracy and you're still afraid of my brother. I understand criminal conspiracies. That made her laugh. Rafael finally looked at her properly. The darkness between them softened. Celina leaned across the console and kissed him. Not urgently this time. Quietly. When she pulled away, Rafael rested his forehead against hers. If something happens to you because of me. She interrupted him. Do not finish that sentence. Celina. No promises about sacrificing yourself. No deciding what I need. No heroic nonsense. His mouth twitched. Very specific. I've had years to prepare. He kissed her again. Then his phone rang. Mateus. Rafael answered immediately. Where are you? Driving south. I told you not to come. Augusto called Celina. Silence. Mateus's voice dropped. What did he say? That you're interfering with something bigger. Mateus swore. Then, I know what he wants. Rafael straightened. What? The port. They reached Maputo shortly after sunrise. The city was waking beneath pale gold light. Minibuses filled the roads. Vendors arranged fruit along pavements. The bay shimmered beyond the palms, deceptively peaceful. Mateus was waiting at the house. Celina barely reached the door before he pulled her into his arms. You're all right. I'm fine. He kissed her forehead. Then looked at Rafael. The relief on his face was unmistakable. You too. Rafael nodded. For one awful second Celina remembered kissing him several hours earlier. She stepped away before her face betrayed her. Mateus led them into his study. Maps and documents covered the desk. This isn't about smuggling routes, he said. Augusto has been negotiating control of 2 private cargo terminals. Rafael frowned. With who? A consortium fronting for a Durban syndicate. Celina looked between them. Why does that matter? Mateus tapped the map. Because whoever controls those terminals controls what moves through them. Legal cargo. Illegal cargo. Everything. And you stopped him. I refused to sign over my access. Rafael understood first. That's why he's dismantling you. Mateus nodded. He needs me frightened enough to sell. Celina stared at the man she had known as an uncle all her life. Not in person. In memory. Every smile looked different now. Every lesson. Every kindness. Mateus said, "He wants the business." Rafael shook his head. "No." Mateus looked at him. "He wants you to think he wants the business." "What does he actually want?" Rafael stared at the port map. "Your signature." Silence. Celina frowned. "Why would that be different?" "Because businesses can be rebuilt," Rafael said. "But Augusto needs legitimate ownership transferred before his partners arrive." Mateus's expression changed. "When?" Rafael looked at the documents. "Soon." A car horn sounded outside. Then another. One of Mateus's security men entered quickly. "We have visitors." Mateus moved to the window. 3 black vehicles had stopped outside the gates. Celina joined him. An older man stepped from the middle car. Not Augusto. Someone she did not recognize. 2 men followed. Then Augusto emerged from the final vehicle. Rafael came beside her. His entire body went still. Mateus smiled once. There was no humor in it. "So?" He walked toward the door. He finally came home. Celina grabbed his arm. "Mateus." He looked at her. "Stay inside." She nearly argued. Then she saw his face. This was no longer her overprotective brother. This was the man people in Maputo feared. Rafael moved toward the door with him. Celina caught Rafael's hand for 1 second. He turned. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. Then he followed Mateus outside. Augusto stood beyond the gates beneath the morning sun, the man who had raised them waiting with the men who had come to take everything from them. And Celina suddenly understood something Augusto had not. He thought Rafael's loyalty belonged to Mateus. He had no idea Rafael now had someone else to lose. Mateus did not open the gate. He stood on one side of it with Rafael beside him. Augusto stood on the other. For nearly 20 years, the 3 men had occupied the same rooms, eaten from the same tables and fought the same enemies. Now iron bars separated them. Celina watched from the veranda. The older stranger beside Augusto wore an immaculate pale suit despite the Maputo heat. 82H7. He looked toward Mateus's house with the casual confidence of someone who had already imagined owning it. Augusto spoke first. "Open the gate." Q. Mateus smiled. "You seem confused about whose house this is." The stranger stepped forward. "Mr. Mucavele, my name is Elias Nadu." Mateus did not acknowledge him. His eyes remained on Augusto. "You burned my warehouse." Augusto's expression barely changed. "You refused to listen. You attacked my drivers. They were warned." Rafael moved closer to the gate. "Those men trusted you." Augusto finally looked at him. "And you think Mateus deserves that trust?" "Yes." The answer came so quickly that Augusto blinked. Rafael continued. "He is arrogant, difficult, occasionally unbearable." Mateus glanced sideways. "Occasionally. But he never pretended to love us while negotiating our destruction." For the first time, Augusto looked wounded. Celina almost hated Rafael for making the old man human again. Almost. Nadu sighed impatiently. "This is becoming sentimental." Mateus finally looked at him. "That is because you arrived at a family argument without being invited." Nadu smiled. "The terminals. Sign them over and this ends." "No, you haven't heard the offer." "I don't care." "You should." Nadu looked toward the veranda. Toward Celina. Rafael moved before Mateus did. 1 step. Small. Instinctive. Augusto saw it. His eyes moved from Rafael to Celina. And understood. Celina felt the moment travel across the courtyard. Augusto stared at Rafael. "You." Rafael said nothing. Then Augusto laughed once. Not happily. "After all these years." Mateus frowned. "What?" Nobody answered. Celina closed her eyes briefly. Of all the possible moments. "Of course." Mateus looked from Rafael to his sister. Then back. "What?" Rafael turned. Celina had never seen him afraid of Mateus before. Not during gunfire. Not during betrayal. Not while facing 3 armed men outside the gate. But now? Absolutely terrified. Celina almost laughed. "Later," she said. Mateus stared at her. "Celina." "Much later." Nadu watched them with open disbelief. "Is this really happening now?" Mateus pointed at him. "You be quiet." Even one of the guards coughed to hide a laugh. The standoff ended without gunfire. That worried Rafael. Men like Nadu did not drive from Durban to Maputo to accept no politely. Augusto and the others left just before noon. By 1, Mateus had doubled the guards. By 2, Rafael discovered why Augusto had come personally. The transfer papers were missing. He walked into Mateus's study holding an empty folder. "Where are the originals?" Mateus looked up. "What?" "The port agreements." "In the safe." "No." Mateus stood. Celina entered behind Rafael. Someone had opened the safe. Nothing else was gone. Cash remained. Passports remained. A pistol remained untouched. Only the port documents had disappeared. Mateus swore softly. Who had access? 5 people, Rafael said. 4 outside. Celina understood. And the 5th. Rafael met Mateus's eyes. Your lawyer. They found him before sunset. Not hiding. Eating prawns at a waterfront restaurant on Avenida da Marginal. Mateus sat opposite him. Celina and Rafael remained outside near the sea. Neither could hear the conversation. They did not need to. 10 minutes later, the lawyer began crying. Celina watched the waves breaking beyond the road. Very dignified. Rafael leaned beside her. He was always dramatic. Mateus frightens people. He frightens me. She looked up. Really? No. She elbowed him. He smiled. For one strange moment, despite everything, Maputo felt normal around them. Cars moving along the marginal. Music from the restaurant. Families walking near the water. The smell of prawns, chili, and charcoal drifting into the evening air. Celina had missed this. Not danger. Home. Rafael watched her. You're really staying? She nodded. For a while. A while. Possibly longer. Something warm entered his expression. Because of Mateus. Celina tilted her head. Possibly not. Rafael looked toward the restaurant. Your brother discovered us approximately 5 hours ago. He discovered something. He looked at me like he was calculating where to bury me. He's emotional. He controls cargo routes across half the coast. Still emotional. Rafael laughed. Then he became serious. If we get through this, I'm telling him properly. Celina studied him. You don't need his permission. I know. Then why? Because he's my brother. That answer mattered. She reached for his hand. And I'm not asking you to choose between us. Rafael squeezed her fingers. That may be exactly what he asks. Then choose me. He looked at her sharply. Celina smiled. I'm joking. You are not. Mostly. Rafael pulled her closer. Their foreheads touched. I would choose you. The words were quiet. Celina stopped smiling. That's exactly what I don't want. He frowned. I love my brother. So do I. I don't want to become the reason you lose him. Rafael looked toward Mateus through the restaurant window. Then maybe loving you means refusing the choice. Celina kissed him. Quickly, softly, and unfortunately, directly in Mateus's line of sight. Inside the restaurant, her brother stopped talking. Celina slowly pulled away. Rafael looked over her shoulder. Oh, no. She turned. Mateus was staring through the glass. Celina lifted one hand. A tiny wave. Mateus closed his eyes. Rafael whispered, I may need to leave Mozambique. She started laughing. The laughter lasted until the lawyer was brought outside. Mateus's expression was murderous. He gave Augusto the documents. Rafael straightened. Why? Money. Simple. Pathetic. Human. How long? 6 months. Mateus looked toward the bay. Augusto has been planning this for 6 months. Celina frowned. Then why hasn't he already transferred everything? He can't. Rafael understood. The signatures. Mateus nodded. Mine and Rafael's. Celina looked at Rafael. Yours. He and I jointly hold the terminal access rights. Mateus said, Augusto needs both signatures by tomorrow. Why tomorrow? Nadu's people are bringing a vessel into Maputo. Rafael's face changed. What vessel? Mateus named it. Rafael went pale. Celina had never seen that happen before. What? He looked at Mateus. That ship doesn't carry ordinary contraband. Mateus nodded. I know. What does it carry? Celina asked. Neither answered immediately. Then Mateus said, weapons. The humor vanished. If that vessel entered through terminals connected to Mateus's company, every document would lead back to him. Police. Government. International investigators. Augusto was not merely stealing the business. He was preparing to bury Mateus beneath it. Rafael moved toward the car. Where are you going? The port. Mateus followed. Celina did too. No. Both men said it together. She stopped. Then slowly raised an eyebrow. Mateus sighed. Rafael looked at the ground. Gentlemen, Celina said, we have already discussed this. This is different, Mateus replied. It always is. Rafael stepped toward her. Celina, please. The fear in his voice stopped her. Not control. Fear. She softened. All right. Mateus looked surprised. Celina pointed at him. Don't enjoy this. Then she turned to Rafael. Come back. He nodded. I will. No. She took his face between her hands. No promises you can't control. Rafael looked at her. Then kissed her forehead. I'll do everything I can. Better. Mateus watched them. When Rafael walked toward the car, Mateus remained beside Celina. For a moment neither spoke. Then her brother said quietly, "For years." Celina looked at him. "What? You think I didn't know?" She froze. Mateus sighed. "You both have the subtlety of a burning truck." Celina stared at him. "You knew? Since before Lisbon. Then why didn't you say anything?" Mateus looked toward Rafael. "His best friend. His brother in every way except blood. Because I knew he loved you." Celina waited. "And?" Mateus's expression became sad. "And I was afraid that one day I would ask him to choose." Across the courtyard, Rafael opened the car door. Mateus looked at Celina. "I think that day has arrived." Maputo port looked like another country at night. Floodlights washed the container yard in white glare. Cranes stood over the terminals like iron animals. Diesel, salt and hot metal hung in the air, while beyond the stacks of cargo the bay lay dark and restless beneath the moon. Mateus parked without switching off the engine immediately. "You stay in the car until I say otherwise," he told Celina. She stared at him. "I'm only here because you failed to mention where you were going. That should have kept you at the house." "It should have." "It did not." Rafael got out first, already scanning the terminal. His white shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbows again, but there was nothing relaxed about him now. He looked like a man holding himself together out of habit. Celina followed. Mateus closed his eyes briefly. "Perfect." "You say that," Celina replied, "but your tone suggests otherwise." Even Rafael almost smiled. Then the moment vanished. A cargo vessel sat out in the bay, its lights cold against the black water. Rafael looked toward it and went still. "That's Nadu's ship." Mateus nodded. "I know." 3 of their men moved ahead through the terminal yard. Another remained behind them near the gate. The port should have been busier, but one of Mateus's managers had quietly redirected most of the night crew to another section an hour earlier. Celina understood why when she saw the administration office. Augusto was waiting outside it. So was Elias Nadu. And 6 armed men. The documents lay on the bonnet of a black vehicle under the floodlights, as though this were a business meeting instead of a betrayal. Nadu opened his hands. "Mr. Mucavele. Mr. Nhantumbo. Thank you for coming." Mateus kept walking until only a few meters separated them. "You set my city on fire and expected me to be polite." Nadu's smile did not reach his eyes. "I expected you to be practical." Augusto looked older than he had that morning. Not weaker, just older. The lines around his mouth had deepened. His expensive jacket sat perfectly on his shoulders, but something inside him seemed to have shifted from certainty into weariness. "Mateus," he said, "sign the transfer and walk away." Mateus laughed once. "You sound tired." "I am tired." "Then retire." Augusto's eyes hardened. "You still think this is about pride?" "It is about greed." "No," Augusto said quietly. "It is about survival." Rafael spoke for the first time. "Whose?" Augusto looked at him. "Everyone's. The coast is changing. The ports are changing. Men like Nadu were coming whether I welcomed them or not. I chose to stand where the wave would not drown me." Mateus's expression became almost pitying. "So you sold us for philosophy." Nadu was losing patience. "Enough. Sign the papers." He tapped the bonnet. Mateus transfers his access. Rafael confirms the terminal security clearance. The vessel docks, the cargo moves, and all of you continue breathing. Celina felt the air change. Weapons. Once that ship touched the terminal under Mateus's access rights, everything would be tied to him and Rafael. Businesses, routes, accounts, contracts. The whole empire would become evidence. Mateus did not move. "No." Nadu looked at Rafael. "And you?" Rafael said. "No." Nadu exhaled slowly. Then his gaze shifted. To Celina. Rafael saw it instantly and stepped forward. That tiny movement was all Augusto needed. Again. He looked from Rafael to Celina, and this time there was no surprise left in him, only a bleak sort of understanding. "I should have seen it sooner," he said. Mateus glanced sharply at his friend. At his sister. At Rafael's position, subtly but unmistakably between Celina and danger. And then he understood too. For one mad second, in the middle of a criminal standoff at the port of Maputo, her brother looked more offended by romance than by armed extortion. Celina almost admired his consistency. Nadu, however, smiled. "Well," he said, "that is useful." He nodded once. One of his men moved towards Celina. Rafael reached for his gun at exactly the same moment Mateus did. Everything happened at once. Augusto shouted, "No." Nadu's man grabbed for Celina's arm. She twisted away and struck him hard across the face with a metal flashlight she had taken from the car. He swore. Rafael crossed the space between them like violence given human form, slamming the man backward into the vehicle. A shot cracked through the yard. Then another. The terminal exploded into chaos. Mateus's men opened fire from behind a stack of cargo containers. Nadu ducked behind the bonnet. Augusto turned, shouting at him, but Nadu shoved the older man aside and fired toward Rafael. Celina dropped behind a concrete barrier, heart pounding. The world became noise, shouting, footsteps, the metallic scream of ricochets and the heavy groan of the bay beyond the port wall. Rafael seized Celina by the wrist and pulled her lower. Stay down. That was my plan. Mateus moved behind a forklift, firing twice toward Nadu's guards. One of the terminal lights burst, plunging part of the yard into shadow. Then Celina saw it. Nadu was not aiming at Mateus. He was aiming past him. At Rafael. Augusto saw it too. For one frozen second, the old man stood between all his failures. The boy he had fed. The son he had built. The empire he had tried to sell. Then he moved. He stepped in front of the shot. The bullet struck him high in the chest. Rafael shouted his name. Nadu swore and turned, but Mateus was already on him. The two men collided against the vehicle, grappling, stumbling across the scattered documents. Rafael fired once, hitting one of Nadu's guards, then another. A port siren suddenly roared across the terminal as one of Mateus's men triggered the alarm. In the distance, more vehicles approached. Port police. Marine security. Blue lights flashed at the far gate. Nadu saw them and reached for the papers. Mateus hit him hard enough to send him sprawling across the concrete. Two officers rushed in with weapons raised. Within seconds, the yard began to tilt back toward order. Shouts became commands. Guns lowered. Hands lifted. And in the middle of the floodlit terminal, Augusto Vilar lay bleeding beside the access papers he had nearly destroyed 3 lives to obtain. Rafael knelt beside him first. Augusto's breathing was shallow, each inhale shorter than the last. Blood spread darkly across his shirt. Celina stood a few steps away with Mateus, both of them silent. Augusto looked at Rafael. There was pain in his face, yes, but something else too. Relief. I did love you, he said. Rafael's jaw clenched. I know. Augusto's eyes moved to Mateus. I made you strong, he whispered. Mateus's expression did not soften immediately. No, he said after a moment. You taught me fear. Other people made me strong. Augusto closed his eyes briefly, as if accepting the sentence. Then he looked toward Celina. For what it is worth, I would not have let them touch you. Celina believed him. That did not repair anything. But she believed him. Rafael said quietly, why didn't you just leave? Augusto stared up at the floodlights. Because men like me do not know how to become small. It was the saddest thing he had said all night. A medic rushed forward. Officers moved around them. Somewhere farther down the port, Nadu was being forced into a vehicle, furious and shouting in a mixture of English and curses that did not improve his dignity. Augusto gripped Rafael's wrist once. Then let go. By the time they lifted him onto the stretcher, the man who had once been father, mentor, and traitor all at once had finally lost control of the story. Dawn found them on the edge of the quay. Maputo Bay had turned silver. Fishing boats moved in the distance. The city behind them was beginning to wake, soft and gold, as if the night had not nearly broken 3 people who loved each other in 3 different ways. Celina stood between Mateus and Rafael. Neither man had spoken properly for several minutes. That, from both of them, was suspicious. Finally Mateus said, so. Rafael looked out toward the water. Yes. So. Celina folded her arms. This is going well. Mateus ignored her. How long? Rafael answered with admirable fatalism. Too long. Celina said, that is vague and unhelpful. Mateus pointed at her without looking away from Rafael. You are not assisting. Then speak faster. Her brother inhaled slowly. Did you intend to tell me? Rafael actually had the decency to look ashamed. Yes. When? When your life was less likely to involve armed syndicates. That is not a date. No. Mateus stared at the bay for a long moment. Then he said, for years ago I asked you to protect my sister. Rafael nodded. I remember. I know you do. You have treated that sentence like holy scripture. Celina said, at last, someone says it. Mateus continued. What I forgot was that protecting someone is not the same thing as refusing to love them. Rafael turned to him. Celina went still. Mateus looked at his friend fully now. You do not have to choose between me and Celina. Rafael said nothing. Mateus's mouth tightened. You only have to remember that if you break her heart, I will bury you somewhere very inconvenient. Celina closed her eyes. There he is. Rafael laughed. It was brief, exhausted and completely genuine. I would expect nothing less. Mateus held his gaze for another second. Then he stepped forward and pulled him into a hard embrace, the kind men like them only gave when words were insufficient and everybody knew it. When they stepped apart, Celina felt something unclench inside her. The promise had not broken them after all. It had simply taken them too long to understand it. Mateus looked at his sister. You. What about me? I'm still angry. That feels unfair. You brought a flashlight to a gunfight. It was effective. Rafael murmured. It really was. Mateus lifted one hand. Both of you are exhausting. Celina smiled and slipped a hand into Rafael's. This time neither of them let go. Behind them, Maputo brightened. Ahead of them, the sea opened wide and blue. And for the first time since Celina had come home, the future did not feel like something dangerous approaching from the horizon. It felt like Mozambique itself. Warm, complicated, impossible to leave for long. 3 weeks later, Celina stood on the veranda of Rafael's house in Tofo and watched the Indian Ocean glitter under the afternoon sun. The crisis in Maputo had settled into court cases, investigations, and the slow untidy work of rebuilding trust. Nadu was in custody. Augusto remained in a private hospital under guard, alive but diminished, which somehow felt like the most fitting ending for a man who had spent his life trying to control outcomes. Mateus was back in the city, louder than ever, which Celina took as a sign of emotional recovery. She heard Rafael step behind her, thinking serious thoughts. Very. That's dangerous. She turned. He was barefoot, holding 2 cold drinks, with the same calm eyes that had once made her fall in love with him in silence and now made silence unnecessary. Celina took 1 glass. I'm staying, she said. In Tofo. In Mozambique. Rafael smiled slowly. Good. That is not a proposal, by the way. I know. It sounded dangerously certain. I'm capable of patience. She raised an eyebrow. Your recent behavior suggests otherwise. Rafael set his drink down and drew her close. My recent behavior suggests I'm learning. Slowly. Yes. He kissed her, soft and familiar now, with the ocean wind moving through the house of Marabenta drifting faintly from a nearby beach bar. When he pulled away, Celina rested her forehead against his and smiled. So, she murmured. This is what happens when you stop hiding behind promises. Rafael looked at her with a kind of honesty that no longer frightened him. No, he said. This is what happens when I finally understand one.
Thank you for listening. Tell me, which African country would you like the next Mafia story to be based in and why? Drop your answers in the comments and I will take it from there. If you enjoyed the story, like, share, subscribe. Because somewhere in Africa, another story is already unfolding.